My name is Audrey Offit, and I'm 34 years old. 3 weeks ago, my aunt sent me a video by mistake. There was no message with it, just a clip from a family dinner I'd missed because I was closing out the books for a client. I pressed play, expecting nothing. What I got was my whole family laughing, my brother calling me a pathetic failure, and my mother waving it off with a single line that rearranged my entire life. For 6 years, I had been paying their bills. The mortgage, the truck, the tuition, the rent. And there they were, deciding I should be grateful. I didn't say anything that night. I just opened my laptop and started doing the one thing I'm actually good at. By the time the next payment was due, every person at that table would understand exactly what they had been laughing at and exactly what it was about to cost them. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the quietest person in the room turns out to be the one holding everything together, and where dignity always outlasts noise. If you've ever been the dependable one, the one nobody thanks, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. It was a Thursday night, late, the kind of late where the whole street has already gone dark. I was at my own kitchen table eating reheated soup with one hand and reconciling a hardware store receipts with the other. That's the job. I keep the books for 3 small businesses in town, and the work follows me home. My phone lit up against the counter. A text from Aunt Carol. No words, just a video file sitting there like a wrapped gift. I figured it was a forwarded clip. Maybe a dog doing something. Maybe a birthday reminder for my mother's party coming up. I wiped my hand on a dish towel and tapped it. The screen threw a cold blue light up onto the dark ceiling, and the sound came out of that tiny little speaker before the picture even sharpened. Laughter. I knew every voice in it. My mother's low and amused. My brother's, loud the way it gets after his second beer. My sister's, that quick giggle she does when she wants someone to know she agrees. The camera was angled across a dinner table I'd sat at 100 times. It was the dinner from the week before, the one I couldn't make because I was finishing a month-end close. They'd gone ahead without me. They always could. I turned the volume up. My soup went cold next to my elbow, and I didn't notice. I leaned in toward that little glowing rectangle the way you lean toward a stranger's conversation when you suddenly hear your own name in it, because I had someone in that video had just said Audrey, and the table had laughed. My brother Wade was standing up with his glass. He does that, makes a toast out of nothing. Fills a room, because the room is the only place he feels big. He was doing an impression of me. Hunched over, squinting, tapping at an invisible calculator. Here's to Audrey, he said, and the table was already grinning. 34. No husband, no kids, just her little numbers. A pathetic failure who's real good at adding up everyone else's money. Megan, my sister, laughed into her wine. Be nice, she said in the voice people use when they mean the opposite. And then my mother, Lorraine, at the head of the table, the way she's always at the head of every table, lifted one hand to settle them down like she was the reasonable one. Oh, leave her alone, she said. She's fine. She should be grateful. At least the money gives her something to feel useful about. The whole table broke open at that. Real laughter. The easy kind. The kind that only happens when nobody at the table thinks the person they're talking about will ever hear it. I watched my Aunt Carol on the edge of the frame. She laughed too, but her eyes went down to her plate and stayed there. I sat in my dark kitchen, and I waited to cry. Because that's what you do, isn't it? The tears didn't come. Something colder came instead. Something quiet and level, like a balance sheet that finally has both columns filled in. I reached out and paused the video on the exact frame where my mother's mouth was still open around the word grateful. I looked at it for a long time. Then I reached for the one thing in my life that has never once lied to me. My ledger. You should know who I am before you decide how to feel about what I did. I'm a bookkeeper. I do the books for a hardware store, a veterinary clinic, and a little bakery on Main Street that would have closed 2 winters ago if I hadn't caught what the last guy missed. I taught myself most of it, then made it official with night classes at the community college while I worked days. Nobody handed me a client. I earned everyone by never being off by a penny. People trust me because numbers don't have feelings, and neither do I. At least, not on the page. That's where I'm good. People are the part one never got the hang of. When I think hard, I click the cap of my pen over and over. A little metronome my coworkers tease me about. I was clicking it that night without realizing. Here's the thing, I'll admit, because the whole story falls apart if I don't. I have a weakness, and it isn't softness. It's the opposite. I carry things before anyone has to ask. Bill comes due, I pay it. Problem shows up, I solve it quietly alone at this same table at midnight. I never learned how to need anybody. So I made myself the one everybody needed. I told myself that was strength. I'm good with numbers. I'm worse with people who treat kindness like a subscription they forgot they signed up for. And my family had been on that subscription for 6 years. I just hadn't sent them the bill yet. It started with the house. 6 years ago, my father died fast, the way the strong ones sometimes go, and he left behind the home I grew up in and a mortgage he'd been quietly losing the fight against. The bank sent the kind of letters you don't show people. My mother couldn't qualify to refinance on her own. She hadn't worked in 30 years. WD's credit was a crime scene. Megan didn't have an income to put on a form. So, the bank looked at the four of us and found exactly one person whose name made the math work. Mine. I sat down with a loan officer and I bought the house. My name on the deed, my name on the new mortgage, my signature on every page that mattered. My mother got to stay in her home and never pack a single dish. That's what I wanted. I didn't do it to own anything. I did it so my mother wouldn't be the woman whose house got taken the same year she became a widow. Everyone in the family knew I handled the house. That's the phrase they used. Handled like I'd called a plumber. They'd say it at parties. Audrey took care of the house thing. Light, breezy. A footnote. Not one of them in 6 years ever asked whose name was on the title. They didn't want to know. Knowing would have meant the house wasn't really my mother's anymore. And the story they liked best was the one where Lorraine had held everything together through hard times all by herself. I let them have that story. I was the footnote who paid the mortgage on the home where they all gathered to laugh at me. The house was just the foundation. After that, the rest came on like water finding cracks. Wade's truck loan when his landscaping business went under for the second time, and the bank was about to take the one thing he needed to work. My niece and nephew's tuition at the private school. Megan insisted they couldn't possibly leave in the middle of everything. Megan's rent after she and her husband split up, and she just needed a year to land on her feet. That year turned into 4, and my mother, of course, the steady drip of her, the electric bill, the medication copays, the property taxes on the house I already owned. Every month, it was the same ritual. The first of the month, I'd sit down at this table with my coffee and my spreadsheet, and I'd move money. Click, transfer, confirm. Click, transfer, confirm. Wade, Megan, the school, the utility company, my mother. I never made a show of it. I never posted about it. Never brought it up at dinner. Never once said the words out loud. I just did it the way you'd water a plant. Except the plant kept growing teeth. I had a column for each of them in my own private file the way I'd track any account. But I'd never run the total 6 years of numbers, and I had never once highlighted the whole column and let the sum appear at the bottom because some part of me knew the number would be a mirror, and I wasn't ready to see what was in it. Adding it up felt like admitting something. So I didn't until the night my family told me on video that I should be grateful for the privilege. I know what you're thinking. How does a smart woman, a woman who does this for a living, let it go on for 6 years? It's a fair question, and I've asked it of myself at 2 in the morning more times than I'll admit. So, let me be clear about something. I wasn't blind. I tried. About 3 years in, I sat Wade down and asked gently if he could pick up even part of the kids' tuition now that he was working again. My mother heard about it before I'd finished my coffee. She called and cut me off mid-sentence. Your brother is drowning, Audrey. You're the strong one. Don't you dare make this about you. So I dropped it. Another time, I asked if we could all sit down together and talk about the family finances.
Just talk.
And the meeting I scheduled had exactly one person at it.
Me.
I kept paying, but not because I was a fool. I kept paying because the alternative had a face. Stop the tuition mid-year and a 9-year-old gets pulled out of school in front of his friends. Stop the mortgage and my mother, a widow, loses the house she'd buried my father from. Those weren't abstractions. They were real people who would really be hurt. And I was the only adult in the room who seemed to understand that. So I told myself the story everyone in my position tells themselves. I told myself that underneath the taking they loved me, that the gratitude was just buried somewhere I couldn't see it. That's the lie I lived on. And the video, when it finally came, was merciful in exactly one way. It took that last lie away from me for good. I didn't sleep much. But in the morning, I still made coffee because I'm not the type who lets the ground fall out from under a Tuesday. I sat down at the table. I opened the laptop and my hand stopped, hovering over the spreadsheet where I keep the recurring transfers, the ones that fire off on the first of every month like clockwork. The next round was due on the 1st. I counted the days on the calendar by the fridge, 19 of them. And then I noticed something that made the back of my neck go cold in a way the video hadn't. The 1st of the month fell on a Saturday this year. The same Saturday as my mother's 60th birthday party. The party I was paying for. The party where the whole family and half the town would gather in the church hall to celebrate Lorraine Offit holding her family together through hard times. I sat there with my coffee going cold for the second night in a row. And for the first time in 6 years, I did not click transfer. I opened a fresh tab instead. I pulled up 6 years of bank history, every account, every statement, and I started to read it the way I read a client's books when something feels off. I want to be honest with you about what this was. I wasn't planning revenge. I genuinely wasn't. I was doing an audit. There is a difference between those two things. But by the time I was finished, I'm not sure even I could have told you where one ended and the other began. That weekend, I watched the video again, not to wallow, to audit it the same as the numbers. I scrubbed it frame by frame in the blue light of my phone, pausing on each face the way you'd flag a suspicious entry. I wanted to know exactly who was in this and how deep. Wade was the loudest. No surprise, he was the one on his feet doing the impression. Megan was the chorus laughing on cue. The way she's laughed on cue her whole life to stay on the right side of whoever's holding court. My mother was the conductor. One raised hand, and they all settled. One dry remark, and they all laughed. She should be grateful. She didn't even raise her voice to land it. And then there was Aunt Carol, half out of frame, holding the phone. She was the one filming. She laughed when the others laughed, a beat late every time, her eyes dropping to her plate after. I watched her hand the camera angle around the table, and I realized something that stopped me cold. Carol filmed this, and then Carol 3 days later sent it to me. No caption, no oops, just sent the whole thing straight to the one person it would gut. I sat back in my chair and clicked my pen, slow thinking. I couldn't tell yet what that was. A fumble of fat fingers on a small screen, or a woman who couldn't say the words out loud, handing me the evidence and hoping I'd do what she didn't have the spine to. I didn't know which, but I knew I'd find out before this was over. The strangest part was how normal everyone stayed. 2 days after I'd watched my family call me a failure, my phone buzzed with the usual traffic like nothing in the world had shifted. Wade, hey sis, truck insurance is due. Can you grab it this month? Kind of tighten. Not a hello, not a thank you, just the ask. The way you'd text an app. Then Megan sent me a link to a dining set she'd found. $1,100 with a little note for the apartment. What do you think? What I thought was that she was asking my permission to spend my money and didn't even know that's what she was doing. And then my mother called and I let it go to voicemail and listened later. Audrey, honey, have you booked the caterer for the party? People are RSVPing. Don't leave it to the last minute. And don't you dare embarrass me at my own party. You know how you get quiet. People will be watching. People will be watching. I almost laughed out loud in my empty kitchen. She had no idea how right she was about to be. Not one of them knew I'd seen the video. Not one of them suspected the woman who paid for everything had finally sat down and started counting. And that I came to understand was the only real advantage I'd ever held in this family. Time. For the first time in 6 years, I had time. And they didn't know the clock was running. So I did what I do. I built a clean record, not a rant, not a journal full of feelings, none of that. A ledger. I opened a fresh workbook, and I gave each of them a tab. Wade, Megan, the school, the utilities, my mother. Then I went back 6 years, statement by statement, and I logged every single transfer. The date, the amount, the recipient, the reason where I knew it. I didn't round up to make it look worse. I didn't editorialize. I just recorded the truth line by line, the way I'd record it for a client facing an audit, because that's exactly what this was. Even if the auditor and the accused happened to share my last name. The pen clicked in my hand, steady now. No tremble in it at all. There's a calm that comes over me when I'm putting messy things into order. The world stops being a place where my family laughed at me and becomes a column of figures that add up or don't. I printed a test page just to feel the weight of it in my hand. Black ink on white paper. Dates and dollar amounts. No adjectives. And I'll tell you what I understood. Holding that page under the kitchen light. I wasn't building a weapon. A weapon is loud. And I was done being loud adjacent to people who only ever heard me when I said yes. I was building a mirror, and the cruelest thing in the world you can hand certain people is an accurate one. I drove out to Aunt Carol's that Sunday, told her I was returning a casserole dish, which I was because even now I bring the dish back. She made coffee and we sat in her kitchen, and I let the quiet do the work the way I do with a client who's hiding a number. Finally, she cracked. "You saw it," she said. Not a question. I didn't answer, which was its own answer. Her hands wrapped around her mug. "I knew it went to you," she admitted. "I saw the name after I hit send. I didn't take it back." She looked at me then, and there was something real in her face, something close to shame. I should have stopped them. Years ago, the first time they started in on you, I should have put my fork down and said something. She shook her head. I just didn't want to be the next one they laughed at. And there it was, the whole rotten machinery of that family in one sentence. Everyone too scared at the table to defend anyone at it. I asked her quiet. "Was that the first time?" She didn't meet my eyes. "No, honey," she said. "That's just dinner. That's how they talk about you when you're not there." She told me it was a regular feature. The Audrey jokes. As dependable as dessert. I thanked her for the coffee. I understood her. I really did. She'd done me the one kindness no one else in that family ever had. She'd let me see the truth. But understanding a person and being able to lean on them are two different ledgers. Carol had handed me the proof and then washed her hands clean of what I'd do with it. I drove back to my own house, knowing I was, as always, on my own. I ran a small test. I wanted to see how fast the warmth turned when the money slowed, even a little. So, I paid Megan's rent 3 days, late on purpose. Just 3 days. A nudge. The response told me everything I needed to know about where I stood. My mother called within the hour. Not Megan, who the rent was actually for. My mother, the manager of the family's accounts payable, calling to collect. "Audrey, what is going on with you?" She started, and her voice had that bright, hard edge she uses when she's already decided you're the problem. "Megan's landlord called her 3 days late. The whole family is talking about how strange you've gotten. Distant, cold. Ever since you got busy with your little clients, you've decided you're too good for us." I held the phone away from my ear and just looked at it. 3 days. 6 years of being on time to the penny. And the first time I'm 3 days late. I'm cold. I'm difficult. I think I'm too good for them. "Money was never the problem with you, Audrey," she said, landing it like she'd rehearsed it. "Your attitude is." I told her I'd take care of it, and I hung up. And I sat very still in the quiet. 3 days late, and suddenly I was the villain of the family. So I let myself do the math on what 6 years of perfect, silent, on-time payment had actually purchased me. The total came to nothing. Not a thank you, not a defense at a dinner table. Nothing but the standing right to keep being on time. That was the night I went to the file cabinet. I keep my real records in a gray metal cabinet in the corner of my home office. The boring kind. The kind that holds the actual spine of a life. Bottom drawer. Back of the hanging files. There was a thick folder I hadn't opened in 6 years. The closing packet from when I bought the house. I carried it to the kitchen table and spread it out flat under the warm yellow light. No blue screen this time. No laughter, just paper. There it was, page after page. The deed of conveyance recorded with a county grantee listed in plain black type. Audrey M. Offit. The mortgage note, borrower of record, Audrey M. Offit, signed and dated 6 years back. The closing statement, the escrow disclosures, the title insurance, the whole architecture of ownership, and my name on every load-bearing page of it. I sat there, and ran my thumb down the deed. I'd always known this, of course. I'd signed it, but knowing a thing and looking at the proof of it laid out on your own kitchen table are different. The house everyone in my family called Mom's house. The house where they had gathered to laugh at me. The house my mother told the whole town she'd held on to through her own strength. That house was legally, completely, undeniably mine. I had been the owner and the tenant of my own family's contempt at the same time. I'd paid for the roof they sat under while they decided I was a failure. I clicked my pen once, set it down on the deed, and I felt the last of the fog burn off. I wasn't confused anymore about what I was going to do. I just had to decide how to do it so cleanly that no one could ever call it cruelty. The next morning, I did the thing I'd avoided for 6 years. I went back to the workbook, the one with a tab for each of them, and I highlighted the whole column, every transfer, every account, and I let the spreadsheet do what spreadsheets do. The total appeared at the bottom of the screen. I'm not going to say the number out loud here because the number isn't really the point. And anyway, it was large enough that saying it would just sound like bragging, and I have spent my whole life not bragging. But I'll tell you, it was a house several times over. It was a retirement I didn't have. It was bigger than I'd feared, and I'd feared a lot. And here's the strange part. I didn't cry about the money. The money was just numbers. And numbers don't hurt me. What got me sitting there, with that total glowing at me, was the time. 6 years of Friday nights, I'd said no to of dates I'd canceled to finish someone else's month end. Of vacations I never took because the first of the month always came. I cried for about 4 minutes. I let myself. Then I wiped my face with the back of my hand the way my father used to, and I was done because crying is just a feeling, and a feeling isn't a plan. I finally understood what my mother had meant on that video. She said I should be grateful. And you know what? She was right that someone in this family should be grateful. They were grateful. Every single one of them was deeply, quietly grateful for exactly one thing. That in 6 years, I had never once added up the total. If you've ever sat with a number you were afraid to add up, the real cost of being everyone's safety net, then you already know how I felt at that table. Stay with me. What I did next wasn't loud, and it wasn't cruel. It was just honest. If this is hitting a little too close to home, leave a comment and tell me about it. And subscribe so you don't miss how it ends. The first real test came from Wade. His truck insurance text was still sitting there, the one with no hello in it. Before, I'd have paid it inside an hour and never mentioned it. This time, I waited a day. Then I typed back one line, calm, no anger in it at all, because anger would have given him something to push against. I'm not able to cover that this month. That was it. No explanation, no apology. I'd learned a long time ago that a clear sentence with no excuse attached is the hardest thing in the world for a certain kind of person to argue with. My phone rang before I'd set it down. Wait, of course. The sweetness was gone in about 4 seconds.
Since when?
He said. Since when are you not able? You got those little businesses paying you. What are you saving up to feel important? I stayed quiet, which made him louder. You think you're better than us now? Sitting there with your spreadsheets. And then, because he couldn't help himself, because the video had told me exactly who he was, he said it. Don't act like you're not the pathetic one here, Audrey. There it was again. Pathetic. The same word from the same mouth, except now I was on the phone to hear it instead of watching it on a screen. I let the silence sit. Then I said, okay, Wade. And I hung up one sentence. I'm not able to. It cost me nothing, and it cost him everything. And we both knew exactly which of us was about to feel the difference. After that, the phone didn't stop. It turns out a family that never calls to ask how you are will call constantly the moment the money flinches. Megan first texting that I was being so selfish right now that Wade had enough going on without me playing games. Then a cousin I hadn't heard from in a year suddenly concerned about the family being divided. Then my mother, the heavy artillery, she didn't call this time. She sent a text, and I think she sent it in writing, because she wanted me to have to read it twice. After everything this family has done for you. That was the whole message. I read it standing at my kitchen counter. And I'll be honest, I almost laughed. After everything this family has done for me, I actually opened my workbook and looked just to be sure I hadn't missed something. Some column where the help flowed the other way. There wasn't one. Everything this family had ever done for me fit comfortably in the empty space below the totals. I set the phone face down on the counter, and I didn't answer a single one of them. Not Megan, not the cousin, not my mother. Instead, I reached into my desk and took out a stack of plain manila envelopes, the heavy kind, and I set them on the table in a neat row. I smoothed the top one flat with my hand. I didn't know yet exactly what words I'd put inside them, but I knew the shape of what I was building now. And for the first time in 6 years, the quiet in my house felt like mine. I thought hard about how to do it because how you do a thing is the whole thing. I could have blown it all up in the family group chat, posted the totals, named who'd taken what, let them read it on their phones and feel the floor tilt. I could have called each of them and said the cruel true things I'd been swallowing for 6 years. I could have made it loud, but loud was their language, not mine. Loud keeps you in the room arguing, explaining, defending, and I was so tired of being in the room. So I chose the opposite. I made a plan with 4 parts, and I wrote each one down, so I wouldn't soften on it at the last second. 1. I'd sign the deed of the house back to my mother and set the mortgage up for her to assume, so no one could ever say I'd taken her home. 2. Every voluntary payment, the truck, the rent, the tuition, all of it would stop on the 1st. 3. I'd hand each of them an envelope with their own complete record inside and a single page telling them when the payments ended. And 4, the most important part, the part 1 underlined twice. I would not argue. I'd say my piece, set down the envelopes, and walk out the door. I wasn't going to fight them, because fighting keeps you tied to people. I was going to balance the account and leave. And the calendar, bless it, had already chosen the day for me. The next payment was due on the 1st. So, was my mother's 60th birthday party. I decided to let the date make it look like fate. I know some of you are already shaking your heads thinking she should have just texted them the spreadsheet and been done with it. Stay with me because the way this lands in person is the whole reason I'm telling you. If you've ever had to set a boundary with people who only respect you when you're useful, you'll want to see how this goes. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's get to that party. I didn't do any of it on emotion. I'm a bookkeeper. I do things in the right order, or I don't do them. First, I called a friend of mine, a CPA I trust, and ran the whole shape of it past her. No names, just the structure. Then I sat down with a real estate attorney here in town for an hour, and I paid her for that hour like I pay for everything. She walked me through it plainly. The house was mine, free to deed however I wanted. I could transfer it to my mother.
But she warned me.
And I'd already known this. Deeding the house didn't erase the mortgage. The loan was still in my name unless my mother could qualify to assume it or refinance it herself. If she couldn't, she'd have to sell or find a way to carry it. The price tag came with the gift. The attorney looked at me carefully when she said that part. The way people do when they're checking whether you understand what you're choosing. I told her I understood completely. I wasn't trying to trap my mother. I was trying to hand her finally the actual weight of the house she'd spent 6 years pretending she carried alone. Let her feel what it really costs. Let her decide what to do with it as a grown woman, the way I'd had to. As for the rest, the truck and the rent and the tuition, those were gifts, the lawyer confirmed. And gifts can stop the day you decide they stop. No notice required, though I'd give fair notice anyway because I'm not the one who behaves badly in this story. I had her draw up clean transfer documents. I wrote a single plain letter to go with each envelope. No feelings in it, just facts and dates. Facts have never needed my help to hurt. The party machine ground on around me, and the whole thing ran on one quiet assumption that Audrey would handle it. Of course, I was paying for the hall. I'd put the deposit down on the church fellowship hall months ago before any of this back when I still thought silence and money were the price of being loved. I was paying the caterer, too. And there was a second assumption layered under the first, the one that made my jaw tighten every time I thought about it. Everyone expected me to say a few words. The dependable daughter standing up at the milestone birthday to toast the strong mother who'd held the family together. My mother had been telling people for weeks. I heard about it secondhand, the way I heard about most things. Lorraine says Audrey takes care of everything. A neighbor told me at the grocery store, beaming like it was the loveliest thing. She's so proud of you, honey. Says you're her little accountant. Her little accountant who likes to feel needed. I smiled at the neighbor and said something gracious and pushed my cart away. And in the cereal aisle, I made my decision final because here's what they'd done without realizing it. They had built me a stage, a room full of witnesses, the whole extended family, the neighbors, the minister, all gathered and waiting for me to play the Grateful Daughter one last time. They'd handed me a microphone and an audience, and an expectation. I decided I'd keep the stage. I'd keep the audience. I'd keep the microphone. I would just change the script they'd written for me into the one that was true. The day before the party, I went to the hall to check on the setup, and I got one last reminder of exactly why I was doing this. As if the universe wanted to make sure I didn't lose my nerve. Wade was there hanging a banner, beer already in hand at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, holding court for a couple of the younger cousins. When I walked in carrying a tray of glasses, he grinned at them and jerked his thumb at me. "Careful," he said loud enough to carry. "Don't upset the ATM. She's been touchy lately." The cousins laughed, uncertain. The way you laugh when you're not sure if something's a joke. Megan was there, too, arranging flowers. And when I started to tell her about a billing question with the caterer, she cut me off with a little wave. "Audrey, nobody wants to hear about invoices at a party," she said. "Read the room." My mother breezed past all of it, fussing over Megan's dress, adjusting Megan's collar, never once looking my way, as if I were part of the catering. And in the corner, watching all of it, was my cousin Haley, 19, home from her first year of college. She caught my eye and her face did something the rest of them never did. It flinched. She'd seen it. "Don't upset the ATM." He'd said it like a joke. Tossed it off the way he tosses everything off. But I'd stopped finding Wade funny somewhere around year 3. A joke is just cruelty wearing a party hat, and I'd been the punchline at this family's table for as long as I could remember. Tomorrow, for the first time, I'd be the one who got to finish the joke. Haley followed me out to the porch of the hall while I caught my breath. She's a good kid. The only one in the next generation who texts me on my birthday without being reminded. "Aunt Audrey," she said, hugging her arms against the cold. "Are you okay? They shouldn't talk to you like that. It's not funny." I looked at her for a second, 19 years old, and she was the first person in that entire family in 6 years to ask me if I was okay. Not what I could pay for, not whether the caterer was booked, just "Are you okay?" It nearly undid the whole plan. That one question. Not because I was scared, because I suddenly didn't want her to see what I was about to do and think it was anger. Think it was the family's same cruelty, just pointed in a new direction. "I'm okay, Haley," I told her. "I'm better than I've been in a long time, actually." She frowned, not quite believing me. "They take you for granted," she said. "You're the only one in this family who ever shows up for me." And that right there was the thing that locked it in, because I realized the kindest thing I could possibly do for that girl wasn't to keep absorbing it quietly. So, the peace held. The kindest thing I could do was show her calmly in front of everyone that you are allowed to stop. That you can love people and still refuse to be their punching bag. That walking away with your head up isn't the same as starting a war. I squeezed her hand. "Come find me tomorrow," I said, after I say my few words. That last night, I sat at my kitchen table and put it all together. The envelopes were lined up, heavy manila, one for each of them. Into my mother's, I slid the new deed transferring the house into her name. The letter from the attorney explaining the mortgage would now be hers to assume or refinance, and her ledger, 6 years of every dollar totaled at the bottom. Into WD's, his own column, the truck, the insurance, the loans I'd quietly cleared with the date the payments would end, into Megan's 4 years of rent, and a dining set's worth of what he thinks, and the same date. I sealed each one and wrote the name on the front in my steady bookkeeper's hand. My pen moved without a tremor. I signed the letters, one click of the cap between each signature, the sound filling the quiet kitchen like a slow clock. My phone sat face down on the table the whole time, dark, and I never once turned it over to watch that video again. I didn't need to. I had it memorized. And anyway, the laughing was about to stop mattering. For envelopes, no speech to memorize, no big confrontation rehearsed in the mirror. I'd spent 6 years saying yes to these people, without ever saying a single word about it. I figured I could say no the exact same way, quietly, completely in writing so it couldn't be argued with. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. And for the first night in 3 weeks, I slept the whole way through. The church hall was full by 4. It looked the way those rooms always look, folding tables in rows, a sheet cake under fluorescent light, a banner that said 60 and fabulous with the glitter already shedding onto the floor. My whole extended family was there, aunts and uncles and second cousins, plus half the neighborhood and the minister and his wife. My mother held court near the cake in a new dress, accepting her birthday like tribute, telling anyone who'd listened the story she loved most. Well, after Frank passed, somebody had to keep this family standing. She was saying as I came in, and I just did what I had to do. She caught my eye across the room and gave me the look, the one that meant, get ready. You're up soon. Wade was already loose and grinning. Megan hovered near our mother, basking in the borrowed glow. Haley stood off to the side and gave me a small private nod. When the cake was cut, my mother tapped her glass with a fork, and the room hushed. And she said with a magnanimous little wave in my direction, I think my daughter Audrey wants to say a few words. She's the one who put all this together. She's good at taking care of things. Polite applause rolled around the room. They were all waiting for the grateful daughter. They were waiting for thank you. I stood up, and I felt strangely, perfectly calm. The way I feel when a long set of books finally balances. I didn't have a glass in my hand. I had the stack of envelopes, and I clicked my pen once. The only sound in the quiet room. I'd brought something a little more accurate than a toast. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my mother, I said, and I meant it. And I let the room settle into the warmth of that for a second before I went on. 60 years is worth celebrating. Then I picked up the first envelope. Mom, this is for you. I walked it over and set it in her hands. It's the deed to the house.